Hey, everybody. Today we are going to be talking about America, its ascent into the skies, its becoming of NASA, some Nazis, some Nazis, some Nazis, um, aliens. What are aliens? Fucking, what is it? What is everything, man? Today is going to be a bit of a mindfuck episode, and it's going to be a lot of information packed into a short time. As well, we will be glazing over a bunch of stuff just to get to our point here, but bear with me. I hope you enjoy yourself, and welcome to the first episode of Bright Lights and Scary Shadows. Dawn of the 20th century, the final frontier was the skies, and the Wright brothers were trying to make history. The year is 1903, and facing fierce competition from their peers across the world, the race was on. By December 17th, that very same year, they perfected their designs and were the first to maintain a controlled, sustained flight. Now, don't get it twisted. We weren't the only country with inventors trying to fly. From small-town inventors in Vermont to fully endorsed innovators in France, the scope of people in the mix for this achievement was wide and varied. Europe was fucking throwing money at aviation pioneers to be the first country to fly. And America honestly didn't give a shit about aviation in the same way as Europe did. The Wright brothers were over here building fucking planes out of their bicycle workshop, for Christ's sake. The decision to abandon bikes and focus solely on flying was a very, very risky move for them, and not only did they have to walk away from their livelihood to pursue this dream, but they had to work in secrecy to do so. The Wrights should have been way, way more prominent in American history. But due to a bunch of shit like legal battles and one of them passing away from TB because of traveling around and fighting the legal battles, they would fade away after their groundbreaking success. By 1908, though, France was spending $6.5 million a year for aeronautical research. Russia close with $5 million, and Germany right behind them with $4.5 million going towards research. America was clocking in with a meager $145K a year. And by 1911, every major European country had an aeronautical department except America. We couldn't have more embarrassingly been behind the rest of the world in terms of aeronautical research, and it was about to become abundantly clear by the end of 1914. World War I's about to pop off, so here's a quick rundown of how that all plays out during the summer and fall of 1914. Alright, so in June of 1914, during a visit to Bosnia, Franz Ferdinand, the Archduke, not the artist, and his wife were murdered by a solo Serbian assassin. Understandably, right? Like, Austria is fucking furious over the death of the Archduke and declares war on Serbia, with Germany there in the background, like, yeah, like, go ahead, man, like, do it, we got your back, fuck it, yeah, man, do it, yeah, do it. And Britain immediately is like, oh, good heavens, chaps. Can we all just please sit and settle our differences over a cup of tea? We've brought opium. And then Russia, right? Russia hits up Germany. They're like, comrade, please, tell little friend to calm the fuck down, okay? He's making very big problem. We don't want problem. You don't want problem. Nobody wants problem. Let us just fucking relax, okay? Austria gives zero fucks about any of this, right? And they're like, "Argh!" And just starts bombing fucking Belgrade, the capital of Serbia. Russia gets pissed, right? And they start to mobilize their army, and then Germany takes issue with that shit. Germany decides to declare war on Russia. And now France, seeing that happen, along with Belgium, start to mobilize their armies and shit, seeing what's going on. And now Germany's response to that is to fucking invade Belgium, take all the waffles to begin work on their fabled Wunderwaffel. And then they declare war on France to top it off. And now again, Britain steps in here and they're like, oh, chaps, oh, please, oh, God, oh, fucking dear, I must say, you can't have the crepes and the waffles. Oh, it's fucking ridiculous. No, good heavens, no. Absolutely not. I do say we now declare war as well. Yes. Is that right, chaps? No, put the fucking opium down. We're declaring war, for Christ's sake. Austria, not to be left out on any of this, declares war on Russia. And all of this dragged in numerous other countries into the battle, which got it overall dubbed as the World War. And it was just because of Archduke Franz Ferdinand fucking got capped with his wife, by a assassin. And that's what started the whole fucking thing. By the start of the following year, Woodrow Wilson put together a council of 13 men called the National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics. In 1915, NACA was signed into existence with only a budget of $5,000, and the 13 positions were unpaid. I think it bears mentioning here that this was an effort to catch up with the rest of the world. Like, sure, yeah, we were the first to record a modern flight, but it wasn't by a wide fucking margin compared to what France was putting out. There were a few other people that almost beat us to the punch here. We should not have been resting on our laurels here at all, but we were. Very American of us, but all right, let's keep it going. Many pioneers were still fighting to make the best commercially applicable airplanes. With the hounds of war unleashed, there was no better time really to secure funding or muster up fucking weird innovations for aircrafts, and it showed. Except for here in America. Again, the U.S. only had 23 planes when the war kicked off, and they were in no shape to help outside of just providing pilots. The French, English, Germans, and Italians were the leaders in terms of aircraft manufacturing during the war. The French were the first to figure out how to attach a machine gun to a plane, creating the first fighter planes, and with it the first fighter aces, giving birth to legends like René Franck from France with 75 confirmed kills, and Manfred von Richthofen, aka the Red Motherfucking Baron, who was the ace of aces with 80 confirmed kills. The closest American pilot was Eddie Rickenbacker, who was credited with only 26 kills. By the end of the war, though, two things were fucking clear. One, the Germans had the most innovative and deadly aircraft, and two, air dominance was crucial. Now we fast forward. We learned in 1920, 2 years after the war, President Woodrow Wilson appoints who but Orville Wright to the board of NACA. His brother Wilbur had passed away a few years prior due to complications from TB, as we had mentioned a little while ago. With Orville being brought into the fold, though, NACA changes its whole approach, right? And begins fostering aviation in the military and civilian sectors. America realized how far back it was and how foolish they were, and it was time to make amends here. This ends up giving birth to the first research facility in Hampton, Virginia. This now famous wind tunnel was just like the Wright Flyer, meaning it was nothing overly special. However, it was the advancements made with these devices that made them special. America made great use of its first wind tunnel, and now with fresh research labs and equipment, NACA started to push for standardization, which I can understand. Can you imagine an entire country making planes and plane pieces, and none of that shit following the same order or process, guidelines, any of that? It would be insane. This whole industry needed to be regulated, and that was the whole goal. And so from that, we end up with the MAA, the Manufacturer Aviation Association, meant for cross-licensing to use as like a patent pool for manufacturers and shit, and the Bureau of Aeronautics to issue regulations. These two things would help stabilize the market and promote commercial and military development in America. And during peacetime, aviation became synonymous with commerce. Bombers were getting converted to planes. Airports started popping up all over the place, like the Atlanta International Airport, and what a fucking treat that place is. During this time period, the bad boys on the block were the pilots. Bomber jacket wearing, spruce goose flying cockpit jocks ruled the day. Names like McCready, Kelly, Lindbergh, Richard Byrd, Earhart dominated the press with their achievements. Transcontinental, transatlantic trips, flights to the South Pole in black would write their names in the skies of history forever. 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 All right. All right. Where were we? And we also got a couple pieces of important infrastructure put in place here. We get the National Air Service, and we also get the Air Commerce Act of 1926. America was happy to focus on bolstering its air capabilities, and she most certainly did. The technological breakthroughs from NACA's many research tunnels enabled much greater distance and speed. They had tunnels to test anything and everything in the 30s, and they were fucking cruising. But here we go again. The fucking war drum stopped banging. And with that, World War II is fast approaching. NACA starts to pump out a ton more research because of such things. Then by the 40s, their research contributions were found in just about every aircraft design of the time. But these fucking Germans, man. Bro, at the start of the war and throughout a good portion of it, the Germans held air superiority, all right? Now, this is partly due or hugely due to the vast espionage network Hitler had established, or the Nazis had established. A big part of Hitler and the Nazi Party's belief system was to create a pure fucking race. I know we all know that, right? But the vision was well beyond, I think, what many people can really understand, unless you really look at all of this shit that they were going through. But I digress. We'll get there, right? Bear with me. I got ADHD, man, so I'm trying to keep on track. Since the establishment of the Nazi Party in 1920, supremacy was always the objective, right? And on some levels, though, it's hard to figure out what their end game was or what their whole shit was based on like their whole public thing, right? Because on some levels, they're this master race, but they're not. And then on the other hand, they're in search of a master race, but they're searching the Earth for it, but it's not really on the Earth because they found these people on another planet in another solar system. And after looking through all of my research, I came to some kind of interesting conclusions about all of this that we're most definitely going to be going over later. But back to the topic at hand, though, right? While the war had started in 1939, America didn't get involved until 1941 after the convoluted string of events that led to Pearl Harbor. How the fuck ever you lose an entire fleet of Japanese warships is ridiculous to even mull over as a fucking possibility. The Japanese were savage, bro. They were fucking ridiculous. You don't lose that shit. You don't lose that shit. But whatever. Regardless of whatever conjecture I might want to submit to you on that, we only really need to look at the facts, right? A burgeoning military-industrial complex, greedy banks, and slimy businessmen all wanted to get their hands on some of that sweet, sweet blood money. And the only goddamn thing that was stopping them was the American people. And believe me, there were many lobbies that were being made to try to get the president and Congress to get involved in the war. And if not for the Japanese being allowed to, or just plain slipping by, I wonder what it would have really taken for us to get involved here. But after the attacks on December 8th in 1941 at Pearl Harbor, America declared war on Japan, thus successfully being drawn into the conflict. Now, Germany's held dominance was thanks to its superior engineering and immense spy network. It was also because America wasn't in the fight yet. However, they did make sure that they were ahead of everyone. As I said earlier, Hitler and his crew planned all this shit from the jump. By the time Germany started making moves, they already had spies in every single fucking nation. For instance, right here in America, they had the Duquesne spy ring, and they operated here in America for a number of years. The Duquesne spy ring had 33 plus members and accomplices before being shut down. Its members had infiltrated numerous levels of military and civilian sectors in the automotive and aeronautic industries. Their direct tasks were to get our designs and Allied troop movements back to Germany to help facilitate the attempt for dominance. Thankfully, though, the FBI was able to shut it down before we had entered the war. And now, this was going on in every country too, not just America. I know I'm riding a very specific American slant right now, but we were not the only one being infiltrated and having their designs stolen. But between the espionage and NACA creating a patent pool, our advancements would be used against us and the world by the Axis powers. From bombers to flyers, you can clearly see the similarities in the designs. None more clearly than the German fighter Focke-Wulf 190, which was fucking deadly. It almost happens to look exactly like the P-51 Mustang Spitfire, and this is no accident, due to the aforementioned espionage. Now, once America joined the war effort with the likes of the Corsair, which is my favorite, and the Mustang, as well as bombers like the B-17 and the B-29 bombers, the balance began to shift. The American B-29 Superfortress is the most infamous, as that's the one that dropped Little Boy and Fat Man on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, respectively. By the end of the war, it was clear, right? This time, the Allies held dominion in the sky, which is absolutely insane when you look at the aircraft and weapons the Nazis were developing. The grandeur of Hitler's Germany was not limited to engineering. In fact, its entire ideology was so grandiose that it stretched well beyond our very solar system. They were all in, so to speak, front to back, soup to nuts. So when war broke out, they had a very distinct advantage over everyone. In the end, though, it was not enough. America won the race to develop the atomic bomb, and with it ended the war with a couple of giant fucking periods in August of 1945. More conspiracy around that shit too, because I guess Japan had surrendered already, and we knew that they were gonna surrender and all that shit, but we still did it anyway. Fuck you and fuck anybody else. Look what we can do. I don't know. Look it up. Tell me what you think, or just hit me up. Tell me I'm a fucking idiot. I don't know. Whatever. Earlier in that year, Hitler would kill himself, supposedly. And I say supposedly because, again, there's more bullshit here. Now, the Russians have his remains. And so in 2009, they did a DNA test on the remains, and the DNA didn't match the DNA that was on record that was Hitler's. So, yeah, I don't know. Who the fuck knows what's going on with the Fuhrer? But by 1947, with the war over, NACA was cruising along fast as ever, literally. The first supersonic flight was recorded that year by Captain Chuck motherfucking Yeager in the historic Bell X-1, just 2 years after the war. And as the 50s progressed with the war over, a Cold War with Russia was just beginning. Each side had snatched up as many Kraut scientists as they could, with the emphasis on jet propulsion and rocket technology, thus giving birth to the space race. NACA would begin to spend so much more time focusing on rocket and missile development here, and that was, of course, with the intent of developing conventional and nuclear warheads. But as NACA expanded into the late 50s, they started to look a lot more at manned spaceflight. They had the proper rockets to put one of us Earth monkeys into space, but needed to get us back, and with that in mind, the blunt body re-entry craft was born in the form of GE's Mark II. This is your typical re-entry craft, shaped like a bell with a big bottom, that us astro and cosmonauts will splash down after return from space. Come on, baby, lift the big ass for Sasha. I fucking love when he says that shit. What movie was that? And they're flying the plane. He's like, come on, the baby, lift that big ass for Sasha. Oh, but yeah. This invention will put us regular Earth monkeys that much closer to being space monkeys, dancing in the gardens of the Pleiades where we frolic whilst suckling sweet nectar from the teat of our precocious alien overlords. All right. But, hark the herald angels sing, what the fuck is that Russian thing? On October 4th of 1957, those sneaky fucking Russians spit in America's general direction and launched the Sputnik into space. Sputnik was the first artificial satellite to be put into Earth orbit by a man. The Russians followed up this historic feat in November that very same fucking year with Sputnik 2. Laika, a stray dog from the streets of Moscow, would be the first animal launched into space. She would, unfortunately, though, pass away on her fourth orbit around the Earth due to a malfunction that prevented the cooling system to function properly. Sputnik 2 and Laika would plummet to Earth 5 months later, with both burning up on re-entry. Sad face. In just 1 year, though, the Russians created the first ICBM, sent up the first satellite, and put the first animal into orbit. Russia was kicking our fucking ass up and down the block. First, they hit us with the wet willy. Then they go for the purple nurple. And finally, they went full dirty swirly. Fucking brutal. In 1958, though, after the White House stopped shitting itself, Congress passed the Neo-Aryan Space Act of 1958. Oh, shit. The National Aeronautics and Space Act of 1958. I always get those mixed up, man. Almost a year to the day of the Sputnik, NACA is fully absorbed into the newly formed NASA. NACA would be dissolved with all activities and projects moving under the NASA umbrella. And with this move, we begin our slugfest with Russia. We would end up trading blows for almost 20 years. With the race to be the first, America would clearly win. The Americans beat out the Ruskies at a rate of 2-1. By the end of the space race, there were 72 firsts achieved, all right? Like first spacewalk, first, artificial satellite, first fucking dog launched into space, like all of that kind of stuff. And there are so many to go over, so we're not going to, all right? America wins, though, with a score of 48-24. Between technological advancements and milestones, man, we could be here forever going over it all, at least 4 or 5 hours, if not more, depending on how deep down you want it to go into it all. But it was an unprecedented time for the human race, to say the least. In less than 100 years, after the first Model Ford T rolled off the warehouse floor, we were walking on the fucking moon. Shit, 40 years after inventing sliced bread, we became fucking space monkeys, bro, floating through the heavens. That is one giant fucking leap. And that's it. That's a quick rundown of getting through, how we first flew to how we ended up with NASA. So after a quick commercial break, we'll come back and we will get into the second half, all right?
Are you tired of smelling like a brewery? Have you switched to vodka to hide the smell? Introducing Dr. McGillicuddy's Butt Chug Kit. Customizable, easy-to-hold funnel, hypoallergenic flex tubing with patented sphincter lock technology, and now including our anti-skid biodegradable suppositories for those unexpected coughs and sneezes. Dr. McGillicuddy's, where your ass is the glass.
Oh God, holy shit. All right. Let's hit the rewind really quick. Not only because we gotta go back to the beginning of 1945, but to get like the imagery of that commercial out of my fucking head. Yeah, like what? Hold on. No, wait, whatever. All right, hold on. Hit that fucking rewind button. At the turn of the year, it was clear the Allies would win the war. In February of 1945, Roosevelt, Stalin, and Churchill met at what would be called the Yalta Conference. The objective here would be to divide the spoils of war and figure out how to reorganize Europe. Hitler, again, would supposedly commit suicide a short time later after the conference. And I say supposedly here because, again, of, well, like, what the fuck, right? We're at another crossroad with this shit. They found multiple dead body doubles of Hitler. A pilot during the Nuremberg trials literally admitted to flying them the fuck out. And then the Russians fucked up the entire scene when they arrived at the Fuhrer bunker. Between immediate looting, it is said that they couldn't even fucking find the bodies, and they just threw 2 bodies in a truck claiming that it was the duo. The bodies were charred and burnt well beyond recognition. And again, that's where in 2009, those DNA tests were done with Hitler's remains, and they didn't match the DNA that was on file, and beyond that, right, there's tons of reports of Hitler being seen all over the world, too. None more extensive than the FBI reports of him being in Argentina, to which there are supposedly tons of fucking files. The crazy part here is that the investigation of Hitler's death has been sealed off for over 100 years by the Allies. I think the ban gets lifted around 2048 or around that time, something like that, which I mean, like, why? I guess we know why, right? Because they fucked it up 6 ways from Sunday. So, yeah, makes sense. 100 years. That way, anybody that would have been alive to give a shit is no longer alive, That's why they do that shit. There are literally whole careers based on this very subject, because there's that much speculation on the whole shit. After the fall of Germany and with Hitler gone, all that was left was the spoils. It didn't help that everyone wanted the wild shit the Germans were working on either. That meant getting as much tech, research, and engineers or scientists before anyone else. The Americans, though, would end up with the lion's share of everything in the end. Using their previous bombing research on labs and development centers as a backbone, they held an advantage over the Ruskies. America knew what, and more importantly, who she was after. The most well-known of these operations is Operation Paperclip. Now, if you don't know much about Operation Paperclip, I suggest you look into it. It's fucking fascinating. It's crazy, especially how much it impacted our lives as Americans and in the world. But by the end, we would end up rounding over, I think at some point between family members and everything, it was like well over 6,000 people. And these people were all debriefed and integrated into American industry. Just about every single fucking aspect of America's current prowess came off the back of slaying Jewish slaves by the Third Reich in the mind of some Nazi asshole. You name it, right? And Nazi research was used in some fucking way to forward the science behind it here in America, And however, though, many Nazis fled to places like fascist Egypt to continue their work. Egypt, of course, not being a big fan of the Jews or Israel. Historically, right? Many Nazis also went to or were captured by the Russians. However, as stated earlier, though, America most definitely got the most of it all. Like, between people and product, all of it came here. Most of it, not all of it, I'm sorry. These men, all the rocket scientists and shit, they all had to come together and figure out what the fuck they were going to do. And it was a two-part conclusion that they came to. The first was an understanding, and the understanding was that they were not going to be killed because of their research. Their research was way too valuable. The second was the realization that they had to choose which side to allow to capture them. America being the obvious choice naturally, though, as the Soviets would commandeer your wealth, and the conditions that you would have to endure would probably be less than fucking nominal. In America, you're a free man to do as you please, so it's a pretty fucking easy choice if you ask me, right? And out of all of the people that was snatched up, there's really only about 320 that ever really focused on. And this being for numerous reasons, of course. Some of these men never got to stay either, as some of their shit was too atrocious, and publicly they were found out, and they were shipped the fuck off, Now, before, it's all bright lights, but now is where the shadows start to kind of get cast and kicked up. All these vicious men were incorporated into vast parts of our own society. They were tucked away and put to work with their past whitewashed, and they were hidden from prying eyes. And we got the top brass too, and to be at the top, you had to be a bad motherfucker. And we only really tend to talk about a small fraction of the small fraction. And that's because of people like Werner von Braun. And von Braun and his group would be responsible for getting us to the moon and helping us win the Cold War. With that, they would find themselves freed from persecution. But again, it wasn't only rockets and ballistic missiles for these dudes. They were working on all kinds of experimental shit. And all of these things only really seem to live on in science fiction. Trying to find any legitimate documentation of the German SSE-4 division who worked on all the wonder weapons and super top secret shit. And you'll come up empty-handed. The most you're going to get is a bunch of conspiracy shit, which I know this is conspiracy shit too, but that's all you can find. And they fucking did exist. And a lot of this shit we knew existed, or we know existed, but all we get is video games and bullshit fucking stories out of it. But whatever, hold on, where the fuck was I? If there's anything I've learned at this point, is that the science fiction section isn't always fiction, And I've also learned that the truth is sometimes, or oftentimes, a lot stranger than fiction. And looking at all of this bugged me out. The Nazis were soaked in superstition and occultism. They were created by the Anunnaki, the Vril, Vrill, which means godlike, and the Thule societies, and Thule is spelled Thule, or Thule. Now, think of like a German black nobility, right? A group of organizations based on clandestine fraternal bonds. Check out Lords of the Black Stone and the letters DHVSS. Crazy shit. That's like that fucking Indiana Jones shit, man. but very much like Freemasonry, with beliefs in the same vein of that otherworldly shit, like the teachings of Aleister Crowley. And on top of all that, they 100% believed in aliens too. And not only that, but they had these women that were supposedly communicating with them. And this is where they were getting all their inspiration from. The designs for ships, all that shit was supposedly coming from these mediums. Now, on one hand, you have some of the best technical engineers on the planet. And on the other hand, you have the most extensive espionage network the world has ever seen. Then, on your Zaphod Beeblebrock's hand, you have this design information from a planet called Aldebaran. And Hitler said that once the Third Reich achieved its main goal of bringing light to all mankind, they would usher in a new religion, one unlike we've ever seen before. And I'm assuming this was to be based on reuniting us with our supposed creators on Aldebaran, as they said. Now, let's talk about Aldebaran for a second. It sounds an awful lot like that planet many of us are very familiar with. Alderaan from Star Wars. And, you know, that's that planet that the white saviors, Luke and Leia, lived on. And Luke, the hero. Luke. Christopher Walken, Luke, father. Now, join me. It's God. Yeah. And Luke, the hero, he has this perfect Aryan blonde hair and blue eyes, and he has to stop the evil Jews and save his father, who was turned to help the evil Jews that just wants their monies. You know, now that's not the storyline, but, you know, I bet you're going to think of it whenever you're watching those movies. Snap back to reality, though, right? Well, you may not know anything about this planet or even have ever heard of it before. You actually know exactly where it is, right? It's the 14th brightest star in the sky and the Eye of Taurus in the Taurus constellation. Now you might be saying to yourself, yeah, okay there, Johannes Kepler. We all don't know where the fucking constellations are. But I say to you, settle the fuck down. Because you do, okay? You know those three plucky little stars the pyramids of Giza happen to perfectly align with, called the Orion's Belt? Not the fucking collar from the cat in the movie. The shit in the sky, homie. If you look diagonally up and to the right, you will see a bright star. It's the 14th brightest star in the sky, the Eye of Taurus of the Taurus constellation, aka Aldebaran. See? Look at you, champ. Knowing things and shit. Stick that one in your pocket for your next camping trip. Break that shit out during s'mores, all right? Fucking, I got you, buddy. All right. The Germans spoke to our supposed creators that live on Aldebaran via the Vril Society. Vril, again, meaning godlike. And this group was headed by Maria Orsic, a German bombshell by every sense of the word. Vril members were mostly very attractive women, and they were all mediums. Orsic, being the most powerful, would receive and transcribe messages from these supposed beings on Aldebaran. And the crazy thing here is that just 20 years after the Great War, World War I, Germany is stepping into the rocket age and the atomic age. Plus, they're messing with cold fusion and anti-gravity and fucking lasers and shit. And that's just 30 years after the first recorded flight. That's absolutely fucking nuts. And supposedly it's because this fucking beautiful naked chicks fucking sitting there in the corner like Linda Belcher fucking fucking talking to aliens on Aldebaran, you know, like fucking Obi-Wan's fucking passing her notes in school class, like, you know, like, crazy shit, but like that's what was going on, right? Now, the thing to keep in mind here, too, is that Nazi engineers were keen to admit or claim that they had received help from another world. Von Braun himself was quoted as saying, "We had help," while, you know, fucking pointing up and shit. In the beginning of this episode, there was a whole thing about telescopes and the origin of flight and all of this shit, and I had to take it out because of time. I kept getting lost and telling stories about all the cool shit that I found, and it just fucking was running me way over time, and I had to remove it. But I do want to share this quick part that I came across. Right, I was I was looking for telescopes. There was this whole part on telescopes, and so I was trying to find the oldest telescope, like when it was originally created. I figured it would be like some Chinese person or something like that. And what ends up coming up is this 6,000-year-old telescope. And I was like, what? So I click on that shit. And I'm reading the story about this tomb in Portugal. And the doorway in halls performed like an aperture, creating like a zoom in effect on the location that the opening was focused on. And the location that the opening was focused on 6,000 years ago was fucking Aldebaran. I read that and I fucking was like, oh my God, like my mind was like, just fucking exploded. That's not the mind. That's not the sound that I guess a mind makes when it explodes. I don't know where that came from, but it definitely was like kaboom, like holy shit, like this weird connection between, Aldebaran and this telescope tomb shit in Portugal 6,000 years ago. It was a weird coincidence, but I mean, come on, right? Fucking trippy to think that, 6,000 years ago, that my ancestors in Portugal were, for some reason, fucking looking at Aldebaran. Were they studying the same shit as the German occultists were? Were they communicating? Absolutely wild, coincidental find. And it makes me think that there's actually something there, right? But true or no, the things that came from that connection for the Germans are absolutely why I can't believe that they didn't win the war. Because they had all kinds of fucking shit. And it's almost like they were holding back the whole time. And seems like it was more about secret societies using nations for their end game, and less about nations using the secret societies to further their end game. And as I said before, the true Nazi ideology was one that stretched out and was about the long game. Now, how do you invade the world without invading the world? You attempt it so gloriously and fail to the point where every nation fights each other to get your brightest minds and most dangerous technology. You then allow yourself to work for these states, continuing your work in every major country and subverting these very countries while fostering your fascist ideals. I mean, it seems like a pretty clean assumption to me. And it's basically like the same exact story that you hear in like the Captain America and Marvel movies, which is a pretty big trip. Especially like what Stan Lee and them wrote a lot of those during all of this. So a lot of these storylines and all this shit comes up in all these movies, which is another thing that was really crazy to look at. Like Light to All Mankind, ushering in a new religion, like nobody's ever seen before. Like there's so many things that get echoed in all of the recent Marvel movies, and it's pretty fucking trippy. Especially when you think about who really won here. And the only people that really won in the end were the German war criminals, because a lot of them ended up getting off scot fucking free. Now, I mentioned the SSE-4 division earlier. They supervised all the wonder weapons. This is another thing that brings you on nothing more than a fringe goose chase. As I said before, you can't find info on them. You can't find shit outside of a few fringe fucking things, or books or here and there. There is no record of any other revolutionary weapon types, and we know that they existed. The caveat here is that just about all of it disappeared with the SSE-4 division. Now, there's only one piece of documented evidence that we could probably say is or use as to say this is where the wonder weapons, the creme de la creme of the Nazi and occult regimes, and the SSE-4 division went. And there's an estimated 40 of the newest U-boats at the time, and they went missing. They weren't captured. They weren't sunk. They just disappeared. Period. Gone. And the only things that we were left with for the wonder weapons were things like mega cannons and the newly released jet fighters. And that's the only bullshit that they talk about. Interesting fact, though, Germany did not have any long-range bombers. Can you believe that shit? Like, they had those big ones. They had, like, that big one, like, in the Captain America movie, like, the America bomber. Like, they had designs for these fucking megalithic machines, but they didn't have any that were actually in play. If they had long-range bombers, that would have given them sufficient time to perfect the V-2 rocket. Both of these things combined would have given them plenty of time to perfect the atomic bomb as well. There are many things here the Germans were so close to achieving, though. If they were able to sack the USSR successfully during Operation Barbarossa, who knows what kind of world we would be looking at today. But those things that they did show us, those things alone, they can't be considered the wonder weapons. The Nazis were messing around with fucking cold fusion, atomic weaponry, anti-gravity, and more. Their intent was to go to Aldebaran, and they supposedly were given the designs on how to get there. They were legit crafts being designed and built by the Third Reich. They were called the Honeydew series. However, any mention of them or anything else is on fucking no public file at all, anywhere, and who knows if there ever even will be, right? But the Third Reich is said to have found a series of tunnels as well, right? And these tunnels and caves are said to be underneath the sea and ice of Antarctica. Karl Donitz, the president that came to power after Hitler killed himself, said at the Nuremberg trials that they possess an invulnerable fortress, a paradise-like oasis in the middle of eternal ice. This was the supposed reason for Operation Highjump in 1946. The operation was put together by James Forrestal and led by Admiral Byrd. And on paper, it was simply meant to be a survey mission to survey the area and shit. But Byrd would end up taking off on the last day on a reconnaissance flight and would go missing for 3 hours. And there's stories there that he was pulled into a massive hole in the ground. He claimed that he was met by people that seemed to be Germanic and was with them for approximately 3 hours. Admiral Byrd was a highly decorated man, a pioneer, an explorer, an adventurer, as well as a fucking war hero. Why would he ever make something like this up? Like, it's a fucking trip. Pull up the videos, Admiral Byrd interview. Pull up that shit where he's talking about all this stuff in Middle America and he's saying shit like this, like a fucking dead ass serious face. Check it out. Fucking, it's wild. While the trip was supposedly just a recon mission, it took heavy losses. And to add to the mix, they steamed back home with the mission being abruptly canceled 6 months early. Also, many of the deaths that happened during this expedition are still unanswered for, or they won't answer for them, and remain shrouded in mystery to this very fucking day. Now, Admiral Byrd's own words about what he saw in the hole are shockingly similar to the testimony of Karl Donitz, the German president. Byrd said, and I quote, "The location was a land of blue and green lakes and brown hills and an otherwise limitless expanse of ice." That's fucking crazy. You know? That sounds almost exactly like what Donitz said. And again, like, he was the guy that discovered the South Pole, the first trip to the South Pole, and so many other things. Like, why would he fucking lie about this, right? But it gets even deeper. The man that put together the entire expedition was Secretary of Naval Defense James Forrestal. Now, by 1949, following Operation Highjump, James Forrestal starts to push for disclosure. And through a series of events between him and those that disagreed with him, he would end up fucking suffering a quote-unquote psychotic break. Immediately, he gets sequestered at the Bethesda Naval Hospital with all communications restricted. Forstall shortly after that would proceed to take the quick trip to the fucking lobby, if you catch my drift, by wrapping his robe belt around his neck and jumping out of the fucking window on the 16th floor. He committed suicide or maybe was fucking murdered. It looks way more like murder than suicide. The point here is that directly after the war, directly after Operation Paperclip, directly after Operation High Jump, we have a fucking Secretary of Naval Defense calling for disclosure. We have an admiral going on TV talking about a people in a place inside the earth. This is a wild development. In a wild development in terms of all kinds of shit. And then even moving forward from here, it's a wild development because all kinds of shit is starting to be seen in the sky. You know, towards the end of the war, there were reports of all kinds of weird shit going on. Now, there are designs for a few ships that were never legitimized, but they live on in photo evidence. It's the Haunebu series, Haunebu. And it's the one that we're most familiar with, most of us, honestly. We just don't really know that we're familiar with that design. But look it up, look up at the pictures, and you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Version 1 is a small disc-shaped craft designed for a single pilot, and the next two models would increase in size respectively. The Haunebu 2 and 3 are the ones that live on in most sightings across the world because they're the bigger ones. They have the classic archetype as well. You know, they have their disc shape. They have like a bulbous or three bulbous things on the bottom and the bulbous top. And the same archetype of craft would also crash in Roswell, New Mexico on July 8th of 1947. And that event would alter our perception of space and bend the very fabric of fucking reality itself. The options given to us here are one of two things, right? Either it's a crash weather balloon or it's fucking extraterrestrials. But what if it wasn't, though? I know if you look hard enough, you can find someone saying anything about anything. And this, of course, being no different because you can find all kinds of shit describing this event in a multitude of different ways. From little gray men to simple testing equipment to Nazi insignia being on the ship. And any and every fucking thing in between. Now, honestly, I think it's easier to make people believe in aliens than admit that a foreign terrestrial craft, you know, crashed in your backyard after the war. You know, like, who the fuck are these threats? Who is this? Who is that? Like, it's so much easier to put this nameless, faceless threat to it than anything else, you know, especially if it's some other wild shit that they would much rather keep under wraps, right? However, though, I feel that there's way more evidence to believe that it was a secret type of terrestrial craft rather than otherworldly beings. Now, even prior to establishing all the Nazi scientists and engineers here, sightings went through the fucking roof. Like with shit like the Battle of LA. In 1942, LA went into a blackout and searchlights and anti-aircraft fire lit the fucking sky. There was a ship above LA and it was not of US origin, and we were freaked the fuck out, like unleash hell status freaked the fuck out, right? And in the morning, all that was left were piles of shrapnel from the anti-aircraft gun. Guns, plural. And if you look at the pictures, though, the ship looks exactly like that Haunebu 2 style, which is fucking nuts. And now, so many things are about to happen here moving forward that are some ways they're loosely connected, but connected nonetheless. It feels like it's all connected in some way, or at least in my conspiratorial mind, I want it to be connected. But I don't know, you decide, right? I'll give you all this food and you go eat and you tell me what the fuck comes out. Roswell, of course, happened in July of 1947, but it hadn't been the only report of strange craft in the sky. So much so that Roswell was the icing on the cake for many, and so much so that Project Signs was born from that. Now, Project Signs was meant to discover and report on unexplained aerial phenomena. Directly after Project Sign is enacted, the CIA would be put into place during the month of September that very year. The month of September being, I don't know, weirdly significant, I guess. In 1949, Project Sign was forced to show their findings. Their findings concluded that UFOs are real and not of US or Soviet origin. Now, citing a lack of proof of the UFOs, they get shut down, right? Now, this doesn't sit well with some of the top brass. And the next op to follow that is Project Grudge. You know, like, yeah, fuck you, shut Sign down. I'm gonna make a new project with hookers and blackjack. They were not happy about the ambiguous report from Sign. They wanted it to be clearly stated that these were aliens. And whatever the reason for that, I guess we could speculate, right? That's all the fuck I seem to be doing right now anyway. But Project Sign clearly stated that they were not of US or Soviet origin, but they did state that they were very much real, right? Grudge ends with the flub again, stating that their findings indicate that these crafts are not advanced foreign technology, all right? Still, though, we have an admission here of their existence for 2 years running so far, right? By 1952, the successor to Project Signs would evolve into an operation that we're all relatively familiar with right now. The end of Grudge would be followed up by none other than Project Blue Book, right? 1952 brought one of the most insane stories as well. On July 24th of 1952, dozens of UFOs would be seen over the White House. Fighters were scrambled and they engaged in a chase with the alien squadron to no fucking avail. And it's known as the invasion of Washington, and it sent America into a fucking frenzy. In that same year, Project Blue Book gets put into play and we get another well-known organization, the NSA. I find it interesting that these surveillance and intelligence offices pop up in connection with these ops. Now, Blue Book would run from 52 to 69 and would have all the same findings as its predecessors. However, by this point, the project was a joke. It was understaffed, it was underfunded, and if nothing else, it seemed like these ops were never really meant to provide anything meaningful at all anyway, you know? And these things, they kind of remind me of the war on drugs, where the military in itself is complicit in bringing in a lot of the drugs. You know, heroin and all this come from military-controlled areas. America is the number one importer of cocaine. And a lot of these things come through CIA-backed operations. And so we have these operations where we bring all these drugs into the world, and then we run these other things, the DEA, all these other operations to keep drugs off the streets. And they are all these organizations end up being handcuffed, and they have to follow all this red tape and procedure and all these things that hold them back from actually being able to make a difference. And they can't really make a difference because it's not designed for them to make a difference. The drugs are getting here to help pay for the Black Book ops. And this all seems in the same vein where we're doing all this other shit, and then we assign these task forces to go out there and investigate them and see, I guess, in essence, how good they're really doing in the end, right? But yeah, it has that type of a feel to me. It reminds me a lot of that. On one hand, we're pushing it in, and then we create this other dynamic of look, we're doing something. Look, and oh no, it's so hard. We don't know. Oh, it's nothing. It may not be that way, but it feels like that to me. But I digress again. Now that some years have progressed and they were able to build new facilities to house all of their Nazi scientists, things were about to change up. All right. NACA would come to an end in 58 and give way to NASA. After the formal creation of NASA, Project Blue Book gets called in to present their findings, right? Now, in the same exact fashion, they claim the UFO to be real. However, they say that they are not a threat to our national security. And I find that wording to be very damning in a sense, because it was not how they phrased it in the years past. All of a sudden, after the National Security Agency is created, the report uses those same exact words, the national security. The NSA was known as no such agency for quite some time, and if they were talking to you, fucking chances are high that your ass was going to disappear. Shit, they're still the same way right the fuck now. They can come right now, and if they knock on my door, you ain't never hearing from my ass again. I'm fucking terrified of that shit every day. Especially nowadays. After the findings were presented, though, Blue Book would be fully dissolved. And that string of events is wild to me. You know, there's a clear admission of UFOs, yet we're being told to basically look the other way. What's worse is that anyone that claims to have seen or been involved with these craft in any way is dismissed as psychotic. And fuck them for that. Did you know that after Von Braun and his crew came to America, UFO sightings jumped 400%? 400 fucking percent. This is like a scene out of The Naked Gun. The whole fucking house is burning, and they're standing out front saying, "Nothing to see here, folks. Nothing to see here." All right. J. Allen Hynek, he was the director of Blue Book. And after Hynek left Blue Book, he went on record as saying that his directive was to debunk everything. And furthermore, he went on to state that these things are very much real. Now, here's some quick numbers, all right? In 1980, there were less than 5,000 reported sightings. In 1990, there was almost 10,000, all right? In 1990 to 2000, almost 45,000. From 2001 to 2009, we get a little over 40,000, and then in 2010 to 2020, we get nearly 70,000 sightings. So since 1980, we've had over 170,000, all right? Now, Americans are 300 times more likely to see a UFO than anybody else in the world. And those odds jump significantly higher if you're in New England or the Northwest. All right, 6 times higher to be exact. All right, now, all of this research super changed the way I watch or the way I observe or feel or view the UFO phenomena. When it came to a lot of this Nazi shit, I used to only look at it as some Wolfenstein, Iron Sky, Starship Trooper bullshit. And now I'm not so sure. Now, I'm in no way saying that there aren't aliens or anything like that. But I'm also saying that not everything in the sky is an alien. Sightings and interaction go all the way back to our very creation. You can find great men and women all over time that have written in their journals and shit about strange orbs from the sky or flaming shields and discs following them or swooping down, balls of light that rise out of the ocean and follow along their ships like fucking a pod of porpoises, porpoise, whatever the fucking plural for that is. And so I guess it's kind of foolish to deny these occurrences, right? All kinds of shit has happened over our time here on this pale blue rock. It would be ignorant to think that we're the only ones that are in this world, you know? And is it foolish to only view these things that come and go as extraterrestrials in this modern era? We live in an age of misinformation like no other, and surely history has always been written by the victor. But you gotta look at what the Germans did. In 20 years, they pushed science forward 200. All those programs, I'm inclined to believe that all of them continued here in America. If there in fact was some connection made by Maria Orsic to the Aryan race on Aldebaran, would you not want to maintain such things as well? If Hitler and the right gained so much information from historical sites and ancient myths, would we not maintain that research? Continuing along that path would easily give us the progress that we've gained, would it not? Looking at the facts before us, though, even in the simplest forms, we see a clear picture. We just really don't know what the fuck it means, right? Be it gods or aliens, beings came here in the past from the heavens. You can put that in whatever package you want, be that religious, occultist, scientific, or otherwise. Depending on who you talk to, they're still coming, and with varying fucking intentions. I have no idea personally. I don't know anything else that you do outside of any of the research that I do, and who even knows what's up with all of this shit, right? But listen, we're coming to the end, and I appreciate you staying with me all this time, all right? Now, we've been here a while, so I'm going to hit some of the key points that I have left and some of my beliefs about that shit. Now, Redstone Arsenal in northern Alabama is where all of the German Nazi occultist rocket scientists and engineers were being held, right? if you draw a line from there and you almost go directly across to the site of the Battle of LA, you almost cross right over the Roswell crash site, right? It's almost a straight fucking line between those points. And I'm not saying that means anything. I'm just like, that's like coincidental, right? Now, for shits and giggles, I drew a line from Roswell to La Cumbrecita in Argentina, and which is a German camp place. Like, look it up. They're doing this whole new thing out there where they're trying to, now that the world's becoming aware of all these old Nazi camps, they're trying to remake them. It's like, look at these quaint German towns, right? But I chose it because of its origin story, all right? And it was like this dude, and he's like, yeah, my grandmother and I, we was looking for a place to move, yeah, because we was a good Germans, and we could not go back to Germany because it's so crazy out there, And so we chose this place because it has no roads to get to it, and it was totally removed from every bit of the civilizations, and it was right next to the waterfall. How nice is this? What the fuck is that shit, right? Not the accent, not that shit. Like, I know that that's bad, but like the story there is just so outlandish, like we chose this place and fucking with no roads to it, and it's like next to this waterfall. It just sounds sketchy, so I chose it. And there's New Schwabenland, right? And New Schwabenland is the base in Antarctica. And so I drew a line from Roswell to La Cumbrecita to New Schwabenland. And again, that's almost a straight fucking line. And that doesn't mean anything. That none of those things mean anything. But like the coincidental points, like they're all so lined up. It's weird for it to be that way, right? So on that line that you follow from Roswell down to Argentina, there are so many, all the states that you fly over, the places in Mexico that you fly over, all these places are famous or famously report UFO sightings. Peru, Bolivia, so on and so forth. So well known for UFO sightings. And to me, that was the crazier part of it, is if you just look at this line from even just out there, fucking Area 51 and all that shit. Like, that line from there down to these places in Argentina are hotspots for UFO activity, And there's got to be something to that, right? There has to be. When you get a chance, search a picture gallery called 140 Years of UFO Sightings by thetelegraph.co.uk. Most of parts 1 and 2 show the same type of ship all over the world, and it's that honeyboo style ship. Then you look at the videos, right, that they released, that our military released, of making flying saucers, and it's these fucking comical machines that. And it almost reminds me of those old school flying videos, the machines at the flying videos, where there's like a dude on a bicycle, he's flapping the arms of it, or it's like a few umbrellas and it's one shooting up and trying to push down, and it's just flubbing around all over the ground, and that's what these things look like. They look like fucking jokes. They look like very expensive fucking jokes. And they look, this thing will never work. These things are stupid. Like, flying saucers. That's just a joke. That's just stupid shit. But if you live next to some of those bases, you see shit all the fucking time. There's Groom Lake in Area 51 where they housed all of this shit until about 30 years ago, until they moved it all up into the Rockies. And the thing about that is the division or sector that this research took place in Area 51, was called Section 4 or S4. Which many people of much higher renown than I have made the connection to the Nazi SSE-4 division that had mysteriously disappeared after the war. And then, here's this secret fucking place with an S4 division. It's where they worked on Nazi technology. Fucking, I don't know. It's pretty coincidental. Look at all the weird shit that happens in the skies there. that was all terrestrial-based production. I mean, I guess I can't rule out otherworldly shit since we are here being all fantastic and shit, but it has to be at least 99% terrestrial. I'm not a scholar, I'm not a scientist, I'm not paid to make claims or any of that shit. I'm from where y'all from, fucking nowhere but somewhere. I don't know shit, but you have to admit that it's wicked fucking weird how all this played out. I just started to pull on the thread and all of this stuff started to kind of fall into place. This was just supposed to be a talk about the Nazi connection to NASA, and all of this happened. And I ended up with way too much information to give to you and not enough time to do it, or I could have broke it up, but I didn't want to. I wanted to get on to my other topics and just let this stand for whatever it was. But if nothing else, there's tons of shit for you guys to go over and research, tons of food for thought. But hey, listen, thank you very much for sticking with me for my first episode. I enjoyed the fuck out of it. I enjoy doing all the research. I would love to continue this conversation on more with anybody else that wishes to continue this conversation with me. You can reach out to me on Twitter at WantSomeSpook. You can find me on Facebook at JC Lang. And yeah, find us, man. Find us. Find us. Or we'll find you. But no, listen, everybody, thank you so much for being here. And thank you for listening to the first episode of Bright Lights and Scary Shadows.